Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. Today we'll be in John chapter 5, verses 1 through 23. After this, there was a Jewish feast, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, a pool called Bethesda in Aramaic, which has 5 covered walkways. A great number of sick, blind, lame, and paralyzed people were lying in these walkways. Now a man was there who had been disabled for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, and when he realized that the man had been disabled a long time already, he said to him, "Do you want to become well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. While I am trying to get into the water, someone else goes down there before me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." Immediately the man was healed, and he picked up his mat and started walking. Now that day was a Sabbath. So the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and you are not permitted to carry your mat." But he answered them, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is this man who said to you, 'Pick up your mat and walk'?" But the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had slipped out, since there was a crowd in that place. After this, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "Look, you have become well. Don't sin any more, lest anything worse happen to you." The man went away and informed the Jewish leaders that Jesus was the one who had made him well. Now, because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began persecuting him. So he told them, "My Father is working until now, and I too am working." For this reason, the Jewish leaders were trying even harder to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was also calling God his own Father, thus making himself equal with God. So Jesus answered them, "I tell you the solemn truth. The Son can do nothing on his own initiative, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. For the Father loves the Son, and shows him everything he does, and will show him greater deeds than these, so that you will be amazed. For just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whomever he wishes. Furthermore, the Father does not judge anyone, but has assigned all judgment to the Son, so that all people will honor the Son, just as they honor the Father. The one who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him." Yeah, so you have here Jesus healing a man who was who had been disabled for close to 40 years. Apparently there was this pool in Bethesda where people were receiving healing, and this man who was disabled didn't have the ability to get in there at the time when the healing was to happen. But Jesus heals this man, and but he ends up doing it on a Sabbath. The Sabbath day being the day on which you can't do any work, according to the Pharisees, who had pushed to the extreme God's command to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. So the Jewish leaders take issue with this man carrying his mat on the Sabbath day, and they ask him, "Who told you to pick up your mat?" And is the same guy who healed me. He didn't know, but he finds out and tells them that it was Jesus. So when they ask him about this, they begin persecuting Jesus about this. He tells them, "My Father is working until now, and I too am working." And Jesus claims divinity with this, in that he represents the ongoing work of God in this, of God's work from all eternity past, and continuing into the present and going into the future. If God were to stop working, essentially God is the one who conjoins everything together, holds it all together, provides sustenance to every good thing. Every good thing and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights. So if God were to stop working, then we would dry up and disappear. And Jesus represents this same action of sustaining the world and intervening in it as something that he has been doing and is continuing in. And so the Jews rightly identify that he's claiming to be God in this. In verse 18, he was also calling God his own Father, thus making himself equal with God. And then you have John 5:19, the oft misquoted passage by Muslim evangelists is the wrong word. They call them Dawa guys. But they like to pull out this portion. The Son can do nothing on his own initiative. And just that portion, making it seem as though Jesus is merely a prophet. He's not claiming anything greater for himself. He's just whatever God is telling him to do, that's what he's doing. They then promptly ignore the second part, which goes on to say, but only what he sees the Father doing. In the Quran, in Islamic beliefs, Allah is a father to no one, and in no sense is he a father. But they like to claim Jesus for themselves. So they casually ignore that part, and they also ignore the part prior to that about my Father is working until now, and I too am working. And then further on, you have in verse 21, for just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whomever he wishes. So the Son can raise the dead himself in the same way that the Father can. And also, furthermore, the Father does not judge anyone, but has assigned all judgment to the Son. He claims to be the one who will judge all on the judgment day. And what is the purpose of all this? So that all people will honor the Son, just as they honor the Father. In the same way that you're honoring God the Father, honor God the Son. Honor me. Honor Jesus, that is. So, what is the honor that we give to God? It's worship. And we should rightly worship the Son as well. The one who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. These are all very stark words. And they're words of more than somebody who's claiming prophethood, but someone who's claiming that he does the things that God does. He raises the dead and gives them life. He will have and has all judgment, being in the position of judge, and requires the same honor that you're giving to God. Yeah. So This is not the words of merely a prophet. A feast of the Jews. We don't know what feast this was, but it was probably one of the major 3 feasts in which attendance was required. The debate centers on if this was Passover, Pentecost, or Purim. If it was Passover, then we can date 4 Passovers in Jesus' ministry, and we know it lasted about 3.5 years. A pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda. This pool has been excavated in the area just north of the temple area and found to have 5 porches, just as John said. The expression, "there is," has been thought to import that St. John wrote his gospel before the destruction of Jerusalem. But this must not be pressed. He might have spoken in the present without meaning to be literally accurate with regard to the moment when he was writing. From Alfred. There is a Crusader-era church near the remains of this pool that they, the Crusaders, regarded this pool as that mentioned here is shown by their having represented on the wall of the crypt the angel troubling the water, from Dodds. For an angel went down, and whoever stepped in first was made well. Many sick and injured people gathered at this pool in hope of healing. Perhaps this hope of healing was real, and God honored a release of faith. Or it may be that this was merely a hopeful legend. Nevertheless, a great multitude of sick people believed it. The words, "from waiting for the moving of the water, through was made well of whatever disease he had," are not in several old manuscripts. Nevertheless, the truth of the perception of a healing received by being first in the water is also demonstrated in the words of John 5:7. In that the impotent man answered him, "Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me in the pool, but while I am coming, another steps down before me." At a certain time, Clark and others believe that this certain time was feast time, perhaps specifically Passover. The idea is that the people gathered around the pool in expectation of healing at the Passover season or other feast seasons, once a year only, saith Tertullian. Others, more probably, at all their great feasts, when the people met out of all parts of Jerusalem. If there were people genuinely healed by the waters of the pool of Bethesda, it was one of many unusual occasions of healing in the Bible. Some were healed by a purified pot of stew. Naaman was healed by washing in the Jordan River. One was healed by touching the bones of Elisha. Some were healed when the shadow of Peter fell upon them. Some were healed when Paul's handkerchiefs were laid upon them. God can and does do things in unexpected ways, but something isn't necessarily from God simply because it is unexpected or unusual. A certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. This man suffered from a paralytic condition for a long time, and apparently was frequently at the pool of Bethesda in hope of healing. It was a hope that had long been disappointed. When Jesus saw him lying there, for some reason Jesus selected this man among the great multitude of sick people. Jesus was not about to conduct a healing crusade at the pool of Bethesda, but he was about to miraculously meet this one man's need. A multitude of needy people were there, yet none of them looked to Jesus. A blindness had come over these people at the pool. There they were, and there was Christ who could heal them, but not a single one of them sought him. Their eyes were fixed on the water, expecting it to be troubled. They were so taken up with their own chosen way that the true way was neglected. From Spurgeon. Spurgeon pictured the multitude waiting around the waters of the pool of Bethesda, all of them waiting, instead of looking to Jesus. He thought of how foolish this waiting is for many people. Some wait for a more convenient season. Some wait for dreams and visions. Some wait for signs and wonders. Some wait to be compelled. Some wait for a revival. Some wait for a particular feeling. Some wait for a celebrity. Do you want to be made well? This was a sincere question. Jesus knew that not every sick person wants to be healed, and that some are so discouraged that they put away all hope of being healed. Jesus dealt with a man who may have had his heart withered as well as his legs. Jesus therefore attempted to build the faith of this man. It certainly is possible that the man's long and apparently hopeless infirmity may have given him the look of lethargy and despondency, and the question may have arisen from this. From Alfred. It is possible that Jesus asked this even as the waters were stirred and people started jumping and diving and rolling into the waters, each hoping for evidence that they were the favored one. The man Jesus spoke with knew that he was not one of the favored and had no real hope to be healed. In this man's particular case, it was reasonable to wonder if he really wanted to be healed. An Eastern beggar often loses a good living by being cured of his disease, from Barclay. As bad as his current situation was, at least he was familiar with it. "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool." The crippled man assumed Jesus knew how things worked at the pool of Bethesda, and he explained to Jesus why it wasn't possible for him to be healed. Quite naturally, the man couldn't think of any other way for his need to be met. The man was an interesting case of hope combined with hopelessness. He had hope, or he would never have come to the pool of Bethesda, yet once there, he had little hope to be the favored one to win the healing that day. "Another steps down before me." The man's answer implies the popular belief that whoever stepped in immediately after the bubbling up of the water was made whole. This sick man does what we nearly all do. He limits God's help to his own ideas and does not dare promise himself more than he conceives in his mind. From Calvin. "Rise, take up your bed, and walk." Jesus told the man to do what he could not do. Being paralyzed, it was impossible for him to rise or take up his bed mat or to walk. At this moment, Jesus challenged the man to believe him for the impossible. The bed was not a full-framed bed, but a bed mat. Morris, on the ancient Greek word translated bed. It is apparently Macedonian in origin and denotes a camp bed, a pallet. It is easy to imagine the man's first reaction was, "I can't do that. Why even try?" Yet something wonderful prompted the man to say, "If this man tells me to do it, I will try." Jesus guided the man towards a response of faith. The man might well have said, with a kind of injured resentment, that for 38 years his bed had been carrying him, and there was not much sense in telling him to carry it. From Barclay. He was commanded to take up his bed that he might recognize that the cure was permanent. No doubt many of the cures of the pool were merely temporary. Immediately the man was made well. This happened as the man responded in faith and did exactly what Jesus told him to do. Though a moment before it was impossible to do it, the fact of his healing was confirmed in that he had the strength to carry his own bed mat and walk with it. Because Jesus told him, he asked no questions, but doubled up his couch and walked. He did what he was told to do, because he believed in him who spake. "Have you such faith in Jesus, poor sinner?" From Spurgeon. He healed the man beside the pool, but without his touching the pool to show that he could heal without the water. From Trench. This shows us that the New Testament describes in many different ways people may be healed. The elders of the church may anoint someone with oil and pray for them, and they may be healed. God's people can lay hands on each other in prayer, ask God for healing, and people may be healed. God may grant someone a gift of healing, either that they are directly healed, or have the power to bring healing to another. God may grant healing in response to the faith of a person who desires to be healed. God may grant healing in response to the faith of another on behalf of the person who is healed. And God may heal through medical treatment. That day was the Sabbath. That all this was done on the Sabbath day will be the source of the controversy that follows. The Jews therefore said. Throughout his gospel, John used the term the Jews in the sense of the Jewish leaders, not all the Jews in Jerusalem. Here, as regularly in the Gospel of John, it is important to mark who exactly the Jews in question are. In this context, they are members of the religious establishment in Jerusalem. From Bruce. It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed. Carrying a bed, actually a sleeping mat or a bedroll, was in fact a violation of the rabbi's interpretation of the commandment against doing work or business on the Sabbath. It was not breaking of God's law of the Sabbath, but the human interpretation of God's law. The rabbis of Jesus' day solemnly argued that a man was sinning if he carried a needle in his robe on the Sabbath. They even argued as to whether he could wear his artificial teeth or his wooden leg. From Barclay. Oh boy. Just like, at that point, why are you even wearing clothes at all? You're carrying your clothes around on your back. Oh, hold on. You're walking. That's doing something. Better stay put all day. Oh, wait. Even in your doing nothing all day, your blood is still pumping through your veins. Your brain is still thinking. Jesus persistently maintained that it is lawful on the Sabbath to do good. He ignored the mass of scribal regulations and thus inevitably came into conflict with the authorities, from Morris. This devotion to the rabbi's interpretation of the Sabbath law continues in modern times. An example is found in April of 1992. News item. Tenants let 3 apartments in an Orthodox neighborhood in Israel burn to the ground while they asked a rabbi whether a telephone call to the fire department on the Sabbath would violate Jewish law. Observant Jews are forbidden to use the phone on the Sabbath because doing so would break an electrical current, which is considered a form of work. In the half hour it took the rabbi to decide yes, the fire spread to 2 neighboring apartments. Who is the man who said to you, "Take up your bed and walk"? The Jewish leaders didn't want to know who healed the crippled man. They wanted to know who told him to carry a bed mat on the Sabbath day. This probably seemed strange and perhaps confusing to the healed man. I was carried to the pool today, and if I were not healed, I would not need to be carried home. That's a lot more work than me carrying my little bed mat and healing me and sending me home. Jesus was saving work on the Sabbath, not making more work. To the religious leaders, Jesus was the man who broke the Sabbath. To the healed man, Jesus was he who made me well. Yeah. For Jesus had withdrawn a multitude being in that place. Jesus did not want to remain with the commotion surrounding the man's healing, because he did not intend to heal the entire multitude. It was better for him to withdraw. Jesus spoke the healing words and then went on among the crowd, so that no particular attention was attracted to himself, either by the sick man or others. Afterward, Jesus found him. Jesus found him because he was concerned for his spiritual health. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. Not only his physical health. Living a life of sin is worse, and will bring a worse result than being crippled for 38 years. See, you have been made well. Employs the perfect of the verb, indicating that the cure was permanent. No doubt some of the cures that were reported from the pool did not last very long. The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus. The fact that he reported Jesus to the authorities showed how intimidated the man was by those same religious leaders. The man who had been healed seems to have been an unpleasant creature. As soon as he found out the identity of his benefactor, he betrayed him to the hostile authorities. In theory, the penalties for disobedience on the Sabbath were serious. Dodds cites Lightfoot, "Whosoever on the Sabbath bringeth anything in, or taketh anything out from a public place to a private one, if he hath done this inadvertently, he shall sacrifice for his sin. But if willfully, he shall be cut off and shall be stoned." For this reason, the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him. Remarkably, the healing seemed to make no difference to those who persecuted Jesus. All they could see was that religious rule was broken, a rule that went beyond the command of Scripture itself. Inciting others to break the law, as they understood it, was worse than breaking it oneself. Therefore, they launched a campaign against Jesus, which was not relaxed until his death some 18 months later. From Bruce. The absolute devotion to the traditions of man surrounding the Sabbath can't be understated. For example, Deuteronomy 23:12-14 tells Israel to practice good sanitation when their armies are camped. Ancient rabbis applied the same principle to the city of Jerusalem, which they regarded as the camp of the Lord. When this was combined with Sabbath travel restrictions, it resulted in a prohibition against going to the bathroom on the Sabbath. Oh boy. And sought to kill him. The anger and hatred of the religious leaders is difficult to explain, apart from seeing that it had a spiritual root. They did not like Jesus, and therefore they did not like God the Father. My Father has been working until now, and I have been working. Jesus did not try and explain that he had not truly worked on the Sabbath. Instead, he boldly explained to the religious leaders that his Father worked on the Sabbath, and therefore Jesus the Son also worked on the Sabbath. God never stops working, for as it is the property of fire to burn and of snow to be cold, so of God to work. From Philo, cited in Dodds. In some ways, it is strange that the God of the Bible is a working God. In the old world, it was hardly an honorable thing to work. It was a thing for slaves and serfs and strangers, not for free-born men. Hence, work and greatness rarely went together, and nothing could be more alien to the genius of paganism than a toiling God. It was a revolution when Jesus taught God's love, but it was hardly less revolutionary when he taught God works, for Morrison. Yeah. I know in ancient paganism you would often have these temple complexes where you would have people assigned to do all the work that the god would require there, with those out in the fields dedicated to it and those inside serving to keep everything running there. So it is a pretty paradigm-shifting concept that God works. Though he rested from creating, he never ceased from preserving and governing that which he had formed. In this respect, he can keep no Sabbaths. For nothing can continue to exist or answer the end proposed by the divine wisdom and goodness without the continual energy of God. From Clarke. This answers the objection raised by a hostile and ignorant critic of Christianity. I saw this statement written in an anti-Christian tract. Just say no to a God who claims to be all-powerful, but then requires a nap after only 6 days of creating. This objection betrays the lack of understanding on behalf of the writer. The Bible clearly says that God does not need sleep or rest. He who keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The rest of God on the seventh day was given for man's benefit, not God's, demonstrating a pattern of rest necessary for man's well-being. Yeah. And when Jesus finished his ministry, he said, "See, I've left an example for you," type thing. My Father and I. His explanation shows that he did not claim identity with the Father as one person, but he asserted his unity with the Father in a relationship that could be described as sonship, but also said that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. The religious leaders did not miss the fact that Jesus claimed to be equal with God. They knew clearly that when Jesus said that God was his Father, in this unique way, he declared himself equal with God. He was claiming that God was his Father in a special sense. He was claiming that he partook of the same nature as his Father. This involved equality. Morris also notes that the verbs broke and said are both in continuous tenses. Jesus habitually broke their man-made Sabbath rules and habitually said he was equal with God. That is, he kept saying to them. Interesting. The individual use of my Father by Jesus had a totally distinct and, in their view, a blasphemous meaning. This latter especially because he made God a participator in his crime of breaking the Sabbath. It should be carefully observed that he did not deny the accuracy of their deduction, but continued to speak as one who claims such equality of authority. Augustine wisely said of this passage, "Behold, the Jews understand what the Arians do not understand." Today, Jehovah's Witnesses are among those that hold the doctrines of the Arians, denying the deity of Jesus. Yeah, I suppose this is like the heresy of Arius. That is, Arius's heresy was, there was a time when he was not. Then Jesus answered and said to them. In this extended discussion, Jesus explained that to the religious leaders, some of the nature of his relationship and work with God the Father. Because of this, we have a lot of information of the relationship between God the Father and God the Son. Leon Morris said of this section, the language Jesus uses throughout is thoroughly rabbinic. The Son can do nothing of himself. Jesus explained that he, as God the Son, does nothing independently. He was and is fully submitted to the Father's will. This submission comes by choice, not by coercion or by an inferior nature. Relevant to the Sabbath controversy discussed in the previous verses, this was Jesus' way of telling the religious leaders that he did not tell the healed man to carry his bed on his own authority. He did it in complete submission to God the Father in heaven. It is not simply that he does not act in independence of the Father. He cannot act in independence of the Father. him and the Father and the Spirit being God. Whatever he does, the Son also does in like manner. Jesus explained that his work was a perfect reflection of the work and will of God the Father. Jesus showed us exactly what the work and will of God is. The Father is not passive in the matter, merely allowing Jesus to discover what he can of the Father's will, but the Father shows him. C.H. Dodd discerned an embedded parable in verses 19 and 20. Jesus draws an analogy from his own boyhood experience in the carpenter's workshop when he learned to imitate the things he saw Joseph doing, thus serving his apprenticeship. From Bruce. Some people think of a great difference, or even a small difference, between God the Father and God the Son, as if God the Father emphasized judgment and God the Son emphasized love. Sometimes they think the same way over what they call the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament. This thinking is wrong. It usually comes from refusing to see the display of love in God the Father or the display of righteousness in God the Son. They, in doing so, miss all the times God had mercy on his people and patience and forbearance with bringing judgment on them, and also the judgment of Christ here propounded, and that all judgment belongs to the Son, and further shown in Revelation, where ultimately, I guess also in the Gospels, of the Son being the decider between the sheep and the goats, and those goats essentially departing from him. He is explaining also, by inference, the mystery of the Incarnation, that God the Son is becoming man, in becoming man, ceased not to be God, and that the personality of Jesus is the personality of God the Son. He took on human flesh. He added humanity to divinity. The Father loves the Son. The relationship between the first and second members of the Trinity is not one of master and slave, not of employer and employee, but of Father and Son, united by love. The Father loves the Son. The tense denotes a continuing, habitual love. The Father never ceases to love the Son. He will show him greater works than these, that you may marvel. The religious leaders were stunned by what Jesus told the formerly paralyzed man to do. Jesus here told them that they would see even greater works, ones that would make them marvel. As the Father raises the dead and gives life to them, even so the Son gives life to whom he will. Jesus used the work of resurrection as an example of the shared work of the Father and the Son. Here the Son has the power and authority to raise the dead and give life to them just as the Father does. In this, Jesus appealed to ultimate power. It's hard to think of greater power than the authority than of that to raise the dead. The religious leaders didn't want to think much about Jesus' ability to heal a paralytic. They focused on him as a Sabbath breaker. Yet the power of Jesus went far beyond the power to heal. The Son gives life to whom he will. Here our Lord points out his sovereign power and independence. He gives life according to his own will, not being obliged to supplicate for the power by which it was done as the prophets did, his own will being absolute and sufficient in every case. And that's often how Muslims try to sidestep Jesus' power in the Quran, is by claiming that he's only doing these things by the permission of God. Yet it says here that the Son gives life to whom he will, demonstrating that he has the power in and of himself to give life, but has committed all judgment to the Son. Jesus used the work of judgment as an example of a division of labor between the Father and the Son. It is before God the Son that people will stand on the day of judgment. Even during his earthly ministry, Jesus was something of a judge among humanity. Just being in the presence of Jesus led one to know, I'm not like him. Jesus looked at the rich young ruler, and he was judged. He looked upon Simon Peter, and he was judged. Those were not looks of anger, they were looks of love. Yet when they saw the face of Jesus, they knew a love was extended to them that they were not worthy of. That all should honor the Son, just as they honor the Father. God the Father gave this work of judgment to God the Son, so that people would honor Jesus as they should, and that they should honor the Son, just as they honor the Father. Failing to honor God the Son means that it is impossible for one to also honor God the Father who sent the Son. This was a clear claim to deity. If Jesus, designating himself as the Son, was not God, then it would be idolatry to honor the Son just as they honor the Father. All must honor him with equal honor to that which they pay to the Father. And whosoever does not, however he may imagine that he honors or approaches God, does not honor him at all, because he can only be known or honored by us as the Father who sent his Son. The Father who sent him. The incarnation is every whit as much the Father's act as it is the Son's. The Father sent, the Son came. Carrying on, Psalm 105, verses 37 through 45. He brought his people out, enriched with silver and gold. None of his tribes stumbled. Egypt was happy when they left, for they were afraid of them. He spread out a cloud for a cover and provided a fire to light up the night. They asked for food, and he sent quails. He satisfied them with food from the sky. He opened up a rock, and water flowed out. A river ran through dry regions. Yes, he remembered the sacred promise he made to Abraham, his servant. When he led his people out, they rejoiced. His chosen ones shouted with joy. He handed the territory of nations over to them, and they took possession of what other peoples had produced, so that they might keep his commands and obey his laws. Praise the Lord. Yeah. Thinking through 37 and 38, he brought his people out enriched with silver and gold. None of his tribes stumbled, and Egypt was happy when they left, for they were afraid of them. In the Exodus story, these two are connected, in that each one was to ask for treasure, essentially, from their Egyptian neighbor, and were given such. And Israel was thoroughly shushed out of the country after the plague against the firstborn. Yeah. And the psalmist here highlights the provision of God for them as they go out into the wilderness, with the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire for guidance, his provision of food for them in quail and manna, and his provision of water for them, and his ultimate provision for them and leading them into the territory which he had promised them. And finally, Proverbs chapter 14, verses 28 and 29. A king's glory is the abundance of people, but the lack of subjects is the ruin of a ruler. The one who is slow to anger has great understanding, but the one who has a quick temper exalts folly. Yeah. If you're a king of one, then you're a pretty pitiful king. But a king's glory is in the abundance of people, which I think is interesting. Just connecting it with evangelistic work, bringing glory to God as part of evangelism, of bringing more to him so that multitudes may be his, I think brings glory to God. Yeah, the one who is slow to anger has great understanding. James also says that everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger, for the anger of man does not accomplish the righteousness of God. It's important for us not to get angry quickly, and in our anger to not sin. And a lot is said in the Proverbs about the one who gets angry easily, that leave the presence of a man who is quick to anger, for you will learn his ways, essentially. That is, you will be drawn into his way of life. And that way of life is to exalt folly. So, important to maintain composure. Anywho, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.